Hey guys, Dakota Ebare here, and we're on Table Rock Lake. It's a beautiful lake, but the cool thing about this place is there's so many different ways to catch them. Just about any time of the year you can always catch them shallow, but you can always catch them out deep. The lake's typically pretty clear unless you've got a lot of rain, and I really enjoy that, man. I mean, I enjoy fishing up shallow, but I really enjoy fishing out deep too, using my electronics. So today I'm actually gonna go over with you 5 different techniques that are my favorite ways of catching bass offshore, using my electronics, and really just optimizing everything that I've kind of learned over the last 10 to 12 years of fishing professionally. All right, so an offshore technique that I'm gonna talk about today is one that's as old as the hands of time, right? The old drop shot. Man, it's still one of the most effective ways to target finicky offshore fish. Right here, I have it rigged up with a, with a filler worm, 1/4 ounce drop shot weight, but I mean, sometimes we're at the St. Lawrence River fishing this with a 1 ounce weight, or we're up north and we're fishing for smallmouth using a 1/2 ounce weight and a baby Z2. It's just a very versatile, technique and presentation that I can use all over the country. A lot of times with the drop shot, I'll use it to target structure. Like here, we've got a rock pile out in front of us here in about 19 foot of water. I may not see any fish on that, but I can see the structure. So I'll just cast that drop shot over there and really present it to that rock pile rather than just an individual fish. And a lot of times you won't be able to see the fish there, and we can maybe draw them out of that cover. Sometimes I do target individual fish with it for sure. It just depends on the circumstance, time of year, and where I'm at and what I'm doing. All right guys, we're gonna talk a little bit about another bottom bait that I really like to use. It's Carolina rig, man. I mean, I've used this Carolina rig from 3 foot of water offshore, whether it be a brim bed out on an offshore hump or something like that, or all the way out to the, fishing for smallmouth, dragging in heavy current in the Niagara River. I mean, it's just a great all-around bait. The scound bug I have rigged up on here is just one of my favorite things to use as far as plastic wise with my Carolina rig. This is a 1/2 ounce weight. Just a great setup to cover a lot of water effectively and efficiently and still get big bites. The advantage of a Carolina rig over just a Texas rig basically is just being able to give a little bit different presentation. Having the weight here and the bait here kind of creates more of a predator-prey chase scenario. And I can use a Carolina rig fishing brush piles, offshore rock points like this, targeting shell beds and current. But really, you can use a Carolina rig just about 365 days a year and have some level of success on it. Sometimes we're in really pressured situations where finesse techniques are required, but to be honest with you guys, I still weigh in just as many fish with a bait caster and heavy line. A lot of the times, for me, it's more about finding the right fish that want to eat rather than trying to trick smart fish in that are pressured that don't want to eat, right? So if I can find fish that are hungry, that are in the right mood, that are set up right, and I can catch them on a jig with heavy line, I've got a lot higher percentage chance of getting those fish in the boat and getting bigger bites, I feel like. This is a Strike King structure jig. This is a very versatile jig. It's got a good head on it that'll go through all kinds of different cover, like the rock here at Table Rock, but also these brush piles and stuff. It's a really good jig for that. We've got a good sloping bank here with a rock transition, a little gravel, a little chunk of rock. I'm gonna cast this jig kind of parallel down the bank, and I'm just gonna work it down through there, nice and slow. But sometimes, when fish aren't wanting to be off the bottom and they want to be, kind of tight to it, I can't see them some. And I think, sometimes just traditionally just slowly dragging that jig down these vertical banks like this can be really an efficient way of catching them. Yeah, we're gonna switch to the crankbait here. The 6XD is kind of my go-to, but I'll throw a 6, a 8, or even a 10 at times. Sometimes I'll throw the 8.0, just depends on the situation. But for all-around purposes, the 6XD is kind of the one that I like to go to. You can see this bait's pretty chewed up. I've used it a good bit. For me, I don't pay attention as much to the depth, right? I can get this bait down to about 20, 22 feet, depending on my line size, but really I want to pay attention to what I feel like they're feeding on. If I feel like they're feeding on bigger, perch and bluegill and stuff, I'll go up to that 10XD. If they're more on a shad pattern, I'll stick with the 6XD, like I feel like they probably are here at Table Rock right now. I'll use those brighter colors and the darker colored water, just to get those reaction bites. But here, it's a little bit more natural presentation that I still feel like can get me some big bites, even in a clear water reservoir like Table Rock. The key to deep cranking is making those really long casts. I've got a 7-11 loose medium heavy rods for cranking these big crankbaits. making that long cast, getting that bait away from the boat so you can get it down to the depth you need it to get down to is crucial. You know, here we're just cranking this rock out here in isolated stumps, maybe a brush pile or two. It's hard to go wrong with a crankbait just to get those reaction bites that you really want. That actually is a big bass. Oh, that's what we've been looking for. And just when I said that's probably not gonna be bass, it's a good one. Look at that. Just gotta keep fishing, guys. It's kind of tough out here right now, you know, trying to show some of these offshore techniques, and they've been pretty stingy, but I'll be dang, we found what we've been looking for right here, and a nice one at that. It's a nice table rock bass right here. Look at that. That is a nice one. For fall time fishing, guys, that's a pretty good one here at Table Rock, and on a little Z2. You know, right now I think they're feeding on a lot of smaller bait, and just a nice fall bass here at Table Rock. Beautiful fish. Look at that. You know, we were coming down this bank here, and you got a rock transition right behind us on this point. It falls off into super deep water, and these fish were actually suspended over the channel. I mean, we're right here on the edge of 180 foot of water, but you can see my transition is going from 20 to 50. We're right here on that sheer break, but that's a lot of times what happens in the fall. These fish are making their transition back into creeks like that, and they'll use these channels as, you know, as pathways back into there, and they'll feed on bait in the process. You know, you just have to be aware of what's going on around you. You know, sometimes these fish want to be on the bottom. I'm gonna use that drop shot, I'm gonna use that crankbait or my jig, you know, but sometimes they want to be up in the water column, they want to be feeding up. So you just have to pay attention to the moment and see what's going on at that point in time. You know, are they out there over open water? Are they out here in these ditches? Are they up here on these points? But if I start out there and I work my way up, I can start out deep, and then I can work my way up shallower to where I can find out what depth zone they're wanting to be in. You know, a lot of times in the afternoon, this bait will start rising to the surface like this, and whenever that bait starts rising, the fish will come with it. Look here, here's a whole group of them right here in this ball of bait. You can see them in the bait feeding actively. Look at them chasing that bait, busting it all up right there. And they're so hard to hit when they're doing that because they're moving really fast and they're really dialed in on what they're looking at. It can be very challenging to get their attention. Oh, 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 oh. There we go, just like that. There we go. Oh, I got one of the attention. Man, whatever it is, it's a nice one. This is a nice one. If it's a bass, it's a really good one. Might be a white bass though. Feels like a white bass. Oh, it's a nice smallmouth. Look at that. There we go. Not quite as big as I thought he was gonna be. That's fun right there, guys. I love catching these smallmouth, man. I mean, I had him hooked good. That's it though, man. It's hard to hit them suckers. You see how lean that thing is? These smallmouth can swim fast. And when you're trying to hit a moving target, it can be kind of challenging. And I'm targeting these fish with this Strike King Baby Z2, just on a 3/16 ounce ball head jig, nothing real special. This is a bait that's won me a lot of money over the years, just very effective. But I'll go back and forth between the 5-inch, the regular size Z2, and the Baby Z2. But right now I can tell by looking at what they're feeding at on my graph, they're feeding on pretty small bait. So I'm kind of mimicking what, you know, the forage is. You know, it seems like the lighter bait that you have, the better the action. The more natural the action, I should say. And so the lightest that I can get away with is typically what I use. So I've got my Garmin live scope. This is a LVS 34. I just have it on a 12-inch screen. It's the EchoMat 126 Garmin. I've got my transducer set out to 100 feet right now, only down to 40. I'm not really expecting to catch any bass deeper than 40 feet, so I've got my depth set to 40. Most of these bass that I'm targeting are actually up here on the surface. They're less than probably 15 foot. That's a nice one. Look at that pretty big old spot right there, boys. That's a tub of a spot. Oh. That's a pretty spotted bass right there, boys. I mean, he absolutely choked. That baby's E2. That's the great thing about that minnow. You see where I got him at right there? Right in the dome of the mouth. I mean, it's hard to beat that thing. Gosh dang, when did they get it? That's a beautiful spotted bass. I tried to power fish them. I'd rather power fish them. I'd rather catch them on a crankbait. I'd rather catch them on that big jig, but they just weren't having it. That's just it. You have to try different things. You have to keep an open mind. Don't be sold on this because there's times where they won't bite this thing. You have to just be willing to experiment on that day in those conditions.